Peter is quoting from Exodus 19. Right before he hands these people the law, he says, yeah, we're going to set up a formal priesthood, but I'm expecting you to be a nation of priests. And if there's a nation of priests, then there are other nations who are benefiting from the ministry of your priesthood. And Paul says that of us believers. He says, Peter applies that to believers and says, guess what? If you're a Christian, you're a priest. Oh, I don't have the theological training of this leader or that writer. No, it doesn't matter. You'll get there. But if you're a Christian, you're a priest. And we kind of, all that priesthood, all the believers, that Martin Luther kind of stuff. Well, that's a significant part of what Peter is trying to say here. John, in 3 different occasions in Revelation, talks about believers as a royal priesthood. That's what we are supposed to be. We are supposed to be ministers and ambassadors of grace to the world. And then love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul is from Deuteronomy. The earlier one, I am, be holy as I am holy, that's Leviticus, repeated about a dozen times in Leviticus. Okay. So where do they come? Uh-oh. Wow, this might be a short presentation here. I knew I was forgetting something. Okay, restart the now. So, okay, I think we're good to go. We've just gone over several occasions in the New Testament, verses that talk about evangelism. These are not all the examples, but I just kind of wanted to give you a sample of the fact that evangelism is not just a part of what we do. It is critical to what we do, but then it also must think about the goal of making disciples of other people as well. So do you have any questions about any of that so far before we get into the second half of this? Any comments or questions?
Well, wouldn't you consider Daniel an evangelist?
There you go. Very interesting. Daniel or Ezekiel even. Nahum is prophesying to the Ninevites, as is obviously Jonah. So even in the Old Testament, even among the prophets, we see some of these attempts to reach out into the nations. And some of those attempts do better than others. But yeah, Daniel, here he's in horrible circumstances. He's been taken from his home at a young age. And yet he uses that as an opportunity to be an ambassador for God, for God's truth, for divine principles. So that's a good point.
Cursing turned to blessing.
What's that?
Cursing turned to blessing.
That's right, very good. The cursing is turned to blessing. The difficult situation turns into an opportunity to bless someone else with the truth. And why does God put us in horrible situations sometimes? Because he doesn't like us, because he's up there wringing his hands and saying, oh, I'm going to get that guy. No, because sometimes those difficult situations for us end up being opportunities to share the gospel with someone else. Terry, do you have something you want to say?
In the Old Testament, of course, the nation Israel was a testimony to the world. And while the Lord used individuals at different times, the nation itself, the blessing of that was to be a testimony.
That's right. That's
so
right.
Even in our own lives, our personal blessing should be a witness that we are favored with God, and therefore they would want to know about our God.
That's right. That's good. Yeah, the way we're blessed, the way, we should have the favor of God, the grace of God emanating from us to the extent that people say, man, I want to be like that. I want to have
and our
that.
suffering is a witness, and we've seen that in Renee Costa.
Yeah, yeah. Our own suffering,
Especially.
our own suffering is a tremendous opportunity for witness. So you've got to, in the middle of it, right at that point, you know what I'm talking about, where you want to say, Lord, why are you doing this to me? Kind of a dumb question, but we say it anyway. I've said it. We say, Lord, why does it have to be me? What are you doing? Why don't you love me? It is exactly in those points when we're looking inward that we should be looking around us. and thinking about, why am I in this unique situation? Who am I in this unique situation to minister to? But again, that's all part of developing a mentality, an atmosphere, an ideology of looking for opportunities to reach out. And you know what? I know some of you do that marvelously. I know some of you have really mastered that. I'm not quite there yet. I'm better than I used to be, but we're all working toward that end. So yes, ma'am.
A question about the discipleship. I was just thinking about geographically, and
Yeah.
it was easier for them to stick around after they gave the gospel because it was kind of hard to get to the next place.
Yeah.
But didn't they just make it a habit of sticking around after the gospel was given to give these people a chance? Or did they send somebody else to disciple?
I think we have so emphasized getting someone to make that decision that we don't really worry about what happens after that. I think for them, it was the conversion, and then we're going to walk you through this because that's what you're supposed to do.
Which is the example we need to follow.
It is the example we need to follow. And I think there's a lot of people that consider themselves under the broad moniker of Christian, but nobody has been moving them along the cycle. And they don't know. When a baby comes out, you got to feed the baby. The baby doesn't say, hey, give me some food, I'm hungry now. The baby doesn't know what it needs, it just sits there and cries. It has no idea what to do. And a new believer doesn't either. They don't know how to read the Bible the way they should. And yes, they have the capacity through the Holy Spirit to understand it a little bit better, hopefully. But that just doesn't happen magically.
And would you say, like the man you talked to, the person who's been a believer for a while that was never nurtured, they're in the same spot?
A baby Christian that has been tossed around by all kinds of strange things. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So that's a survey, and again, I'll let you look some of these verses up on your own time, but that's a survey of the evangelism in the Bible. I want you to see that evangelism has always been part of the program. It wasn't just God is dealing with Israel, and then God will set us up in the New Testament for outreach and reaching the ends of the earth. No, that has always been part of the plan. So let's shift gears here and just show a little bit in the different strategies of evangelism from the Old Testament and the New Testament. Now again, some of you might have seen this before, or you might kind of have this sense, but I thought this was fascinating. I never really understood this until this was laid out for me. The Old Testament employs kind of a unique strategy. They build the tabernacle, they build the temple, and what do they say about that temple? The Lord inhabits the temple, and they say to everybody, hey, you've got to come and see this temple and participate in the worship of God here in this unique place. Now, does that mean people can worship or pray elsewhere? No, they certainly can worship or pray elsewhere, in other places. But the place to worship was in Jerusalem. So the Old Testament strategy was a come and see strategy. They build this beautiful temple. They have this beautiful city way up on the mountain, the city of David, the city of Jerusalem, and it was all about come and see what is going on here. They even have a little graphic there. Come up and see. Where do we see some examples of this in the Old Testament? By the way, who soon after Solomon builds the temple comes and visits Solomon?
The Queen of Sheba.
Queen of Sheba. Okay, so right there, that's an example. And she comes with her whole entourage. That we're going to read some of this, we won't, but that's the 1 Kings 10, 1 through 12 passage. She comes with her entourage, and just everything is, wonderful, and she comes up the hill, and she sees it, and she spends time with Solomon, and she eats, and at the end she says, they told me that this was super, but this is beyond anything I could ever comprehend. You have been blessed. And it's not just, boy, look at your riches, look at your table, look at the camels, the whole, kitten. Well, she specifically says, you have been blessed. Blessed are you. Blessed are the servants who serve you. I mean, those guys, what a job those guys have. Rather be one of those guys than kings elsewhere. So that was part of the idea. A couple more verses along these lines. Psalm 66:5, come and see the works of God, who is awesome in his deeds toward the sons of men. This is interesting. At the end of Isaiah 66:18, and this is the end of kind of an apocalyptic section. kind of showing us that this is the way God wants things to be at the end as well. We're in this church age where the strategy is a little bit different, but as we see in Revelation, and as we see here, it's going to be this come and see mentality. Come and be in the presence of God and of the Lamb. Isaiah 66:18, for I know their works and their thoughts. The time is coming to gather all the nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory. Now in some of these, he's gathering the nations for apocalyptic judgment, and that's not going to be pretty. But it is a necessary step to getting to the point where he's now gathering the nations so that they can come and worship him. That's the goal. So, come and see. The Old Testament employs this come and see strategy. The New Testament, as I'm sure you can predict, employs a go and tell strategy. So, it started in Jerusalem there, and then you had Samaria and Judea, and then you went off to the ends of the earth. So it started right there in that focal point, the first several chapters of the book of Acts. And then it goes out into Samaria and Judea and Judah, and it illustrates that. And then by the time you're at the end of Acts, you're in Rome. I mean, you're being propelled out further and further away from Jerusalem. And that's the direction it's supposed to go in the New Testament. We give you a couple verses about this. Interesting that in Matthew, Jesus continually says, go and preach. So the kingdom of heaven is at hand. There's another instance in one of the parables where the king says, go therefore and tell, I think it's the wedding feast, go therefore and tell, people, invite them in. And then, of course, at the end of the book of Matthew, he says to his disciples, go and make disciples. Go out. That's the point. That's the new strategy. And then we've already been at Acts 1:8. Again, we've already gone through the Jerusalem and the Judea and Samaria phases. We don't have to look at our community and say, where's our Judea and Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria? We have to look at our community and say, where is the gospel not being proclaimed? Mm-hmm. Those are the remote places that we need to be. Maybe it's a nursing home. Maybe it's a street. Maybe it's a school. How can we get to those places and share the gospel in powerful ways? Let's see, do I have another slide? Okay, next slide. Old Testament, come and see. Typically, come and see. Not that there weren't people that were sent out into different areas, but typically it's come and see. New Testament, go and tell. So what are some implications of this regarding the New Testament strategy? What does this mean for us? How should we be doing evangelism in the New Testament as the New Testament church in light of this go and tell mentality?
I think it's interesting that we can see that often we get this wrong because we invite people to come to my church or come see my big new facility, or it's not about it's not that you can't invite people, but sometimes we get so focused on a physical building.
Yeah.
It's not about that.
We're having this conference, come to this conference. We're having a special meeting, come to this meeting. We're having this or that or the other. You got to come into this. And yeah, they should. You can please invite your friends to church. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying, but there's also a go mentality. Why don't you go, have a conversation about the gospel with that person, see how they respond to it, and see if they come. I get a lot of people that have over the years said, Pastor, you've got to talk to my friend because they really need to hear the gospel, and I just think you can talk to them about that. And I'm enough of a fool that I'll go talk to him. But what do I want to say to that person?
Why haven't you done it?
You talk to them. I got plenty to do. You go talk to them.
God gave them to
You
you.
go and tell them the gospel. You've got a relationship with them already that I don't. I'm not that brilliant. You're not that dumb. You can go and tell the gospel. We are all priests.
Look
Go
for the
bring
divine
priests.
appointments everywhere you go.
Okay, look for divine appointments everywhere you go.
They're always there. There's somebody that needs some form of the love of Christ.
Yeah.
Even if it's a politeness in the line at the grocery store.
Yeah.
They're always there.
That's a good point. There's always an opportunity to share the gospel with someone. There's always someone everywhere we go that could benefit from the gospel.